I'd like to welcome you each to Unity of Richmond. Today we're going to talk about faith. Faith. In Hebrews 11:1, we're given this definition. It is the assurance of things hoped for and the conviction of things not seen. Charles Fillmore had a little different take on this. He says it's our ability to perceive reality of God's kingdom of good and divine ideas, despite evidence to the contrary, then use this to mold and shape substance. I also have heard him term faith as the key that opens the door to our awareness of our powers. It's the first one listed in our powers. It's the first one we have. So it's the key that allows us to open that door of awareness. But faith is a building process. It's something we have an action to be called to. When everyone in here took a 4T class or a prosperity class, when you went to that class, you had hope. You had hope that your finances would improve, your relationships would improve. You had hope that your life would be improved by going to the class. But some people have a trouble stepping through that hope into something better. If you do, you go to the class and you hear something that resonates in your soul, something you haven't heard before, something you haven't experienced before about prosperity. And then you gain trust. Now, trust is a weaker form of faith. Trust is, you're not to that point where you have a spiritual understanding. But trust allows you to at least have an instinctive thought process that goes through and allows you to see it and understand it. In the 4T class, that means that you have to go through the next phase. They ask you to say affirmations over and over again. And then they ask you to tithe. I like to think of that as making God first. But that's a process that will lead to discouragement at times. That's a process that people get, their old beliefs start to rear their ugly heads into their thought process. Because that's another form of faith. That's blind faith. When you're in that blind faith, you're set into a motion, a series of problems. When Myrtle Fillmore went to DB Weeks in Kansas City, she had been living a life of being sick. She had tuberculosis, and she'd been told her whole life that she was a sickly child. In that process, when Charles and Myrtle went there, she heard for the first time, "I am a child of God. I do not inherit sickness." That totally changed her view of the world. She heard something she had never heard before. And that allowed her to move to make changes. Now, change is a hard thing for most people because the first step is always the hardest thing to do when you need to change. And I have to tell you, when you're in your 4T class, when you're in that, you have to decide to change. You have to get closer to God. You have to understand that's the purpose of the class. We're still thinking about how we are going to get that car, how we're going to improve our bank account, but that's in your head. You have to think about what's here. and understand the message you're getting from here. So Myrtle heard that. She was in that divine faith area too. So what did she do? She said her affirmations. I'm a child of God. I do not inherit sickness. She denied the power of old beliefs to limit her ability to change. She led her life by practicing a daily meditative practice and saying the affirmations over and over again until she got to the point and she focused on her healing. She focused on her healing. And when she did that, through a process of change, she allowed herself to heal. She got to the point where she asked the sick parts of her body to forgive her for thinking of them that way. She had released those old beliefs. And that's what she's asking us to do, to release those beliefs that keep us stuck, that keep us staying in the same place, unwilling to change. Myrtle got to the next phase where she thought she had thinking faith. Now, thinking faith, you're at the cusp. You know everything around you is changing. Everything around you's changed. My work's getting better. My kids love me more. My bank account looks better. Wow, I figured out how to buy a car. Thinking faith is on the cusp of faith. It's when you understand that your life is all the things you've been doing to change have started to change. You start to see it in all aspects of your life, in your relationships. And when you get to that point, when you have that, you go to faith. Faith moves mountains. Myrtle created silent unity from her faith. And the faith doesn't stop there. Early in 1900s, Unity had a building process where they were going to build. They had $6 and they blessed it. And they said, people in that meeting said, you need to have more money. Myrtle said, no, we don't need more money. We need more faith. We need more faith. In 10 years, there was a 7-story building, a school, a restaurant, and the beginnings of a beautiful experience that we have here today. Faith doesn't stop. When you're in the 4T class, when you get to that point where you have faith, you figure out how to get that house. I know somebody in here who's getting that house, and we bless you. You get that car. You start to understand why you have more friends. You start to see why life is better for you. And that's a beautiful experience. You stop yelling at people in your car. You start judging those around you as being less than what they are. Wonderful, beautiful people of God. We can do that in politics. We can do that in religion. We can do that with obnoxious friends. They teach us. They're there to teach us. Not to judge them, not to think less of them, They're opportunities for us to learn. And if you don't learn, you're still looking outside of yourself. For me, the process was longer. It took me a long time to get to the point where I could get up here and speak to you. 14 years ago, I would have died to be up here. I would have been scared. I would have trembled and not being able to talk. But I don't feel that today. But the process wasn't something I decided in a moment. It took me time to change. I had to change the way I lived. I had to change. I had to decide to change. And then I had to let it happen. In the first chapter of Genesis, God didn't tell the world to turn on its lights. He said, let it happen. Well, that's a call to us. If we want change to happen, if we want to turn on the light, we've got to let it happen. If we want to make those steps to change, we have to let it happen. We have to be willing to let it happen. In my process, it took, like I said, it took me about 14 years. That's meditating, that's affirming, that's denying that my thought process was I was broken. I thought I came from a family where I was in my brain all the time. I'm in a job where I'm a pharmacist, and I have to think in my head all the time about fixing things in my brain. But I've learned to marry being in that, even in that existence. And I had to marry that existence with being in my brain. I can love and be in my heart and in my brain at the same time. That makes my relationships with people, with patients, better. But that allows me to be in that space. And nothing's more rewarding when you change, when your daughters tell you you're a better dad. Nothing validates you more than saying you've done the work and you're able to be in that change. Nothing validates it more than allowing yourself to get there and getting there. Am I completely changed? No, I'm still changing. And I hope to change in 14 more years to be even better up here. Thank you. Another validation. So when we allow ourselves to change, I know there's going to be times of struggle. I know there's going to be times when you're tithing, you think, oh my gosh, I just can't do this. Well, there's a story in Bold Audacity of a Swami who was bathing in a river. And in that river, he was peacefully by himself, bathing in the stream. Upstream, a dam broke, and the water came rushing down and swept the Swami, the yogi, into the river. He struggled. His energy barely kept his head above the water, and he feared for his life. Struggle is difficult, and struggle sometimes feels like it's suffocating us. But the yogi heard something the Swami had told him. Let go. Let go of your struggle. And when he did, he flipped on his back and floated to shore. When we allow ourselves to let go and let the struggle stop, because that's up here. That's right here. That's the chorus in your head. That's what the struggle is. Let go and float to the side. And you can allow that faith to carry you into a change that is lasting, that is beautiful, and makes your life better. And for everyone that you meet, no matter whether they're obnoxious or not, you can see them as an opportunity. Faith has allowed me to become an LUT and to stand up here and talk to you. And I appreciate that. But it's a process that doesn't stop. I will continue to improve every day, every minute, every second, every moment to be who I am. Namaste.